The desert had been silent for thousands of years. No cities, no life, only endless sand covering the bones of a forgotten world. But then, a salvage team detected something impossible beneath the dunes. Not a signal, not a weapon, a heartbeat. As they dug deeper into the ancient desert, they uncovered a giant buried robot older than human history itself. Its body was covered in rust and sand, but something inside it was still alive. And when its eye finally opened after thousands of years, everyone realized the machine beneath the desert was never sleeping. It was waiting. The wind howled across the endless desert beneath a blood-red sky, while freezing sand drifted like ash over the ruins of forgotten civilizations buried beneath Arcanis. Most people believed the silent expanse was cursed. Satellite drones vanished there without explanation. Entire expeditions disappeared beneath storms that arrived too fast and ended too suddenly. The few survivors who escaped the desert always returned broken, whispering about giant shadows moving beneath the dunes at night. Some claimed ancient war machines slept under the sand. Others said the desert itself was alive. Elias Kane trusted neither rumors nor ghosts. He trusted survival. That was the only thing life had left him after the energy wars erased nearly everything he once loved. Elias was 34 years old, tall and lean from years of physical labor, with sharp cheekbones and dark brown eyes that constantly looked exhausted no matter how much he rested. A jagged scar cut across the right side of his jaw, a permanent reminder from the night his city burned. Thick black stubble covered his face because he rarely cared enough to shave anymore. Before the wars, Elias had been a structural rescue engineer, the kind of man who climbed into collapsing buildings to pull strangers back into the light. Back then, people described him as patient, stubbornly kind, and impossible to intimidate. But grief changed people slowly, like rust spreading across metal. After watching his home vanish beneath orbital firestorms, Elias became quieter, harder. The world had taught him that hope was expensive. Only one thing still mattered to him now: his younger sister, Mira. Mira Kane was 23, small and pale from radiation sickness, with soft auburn hair that had begun falling out months earlier due to prolonged exposure during the war evacuations. Even while dying inside a refugee shelter near the northern border colonies, she still smiled whenever Elias visited her. That smile destroyed him more than the illness itself. She kept pretending everything would be okay because she knew guilt was eating him alive. The treatments required to save her cost more money than Elias could earn in years. That was why he accepted Heliox's offer. Heliox Corporation specialized in recovering ancient technology buried beneath hostile regions abandoned after the wars. Most people hated the company. Heliox executives grew rich scavenging old battlefields and forgotten ruins while millions starved outside the protected megacities. But Heliox paid extremely well, especially for jobs nobody else wanted. Arcanis was at the top of that list. The crawler convoy moved slowly through the desert beneath towering clouds stained crimson by the dying atmosphere. The giant vehicles resembled mechanical fortresses crawling across an ocean of fire-colored sand. Inside the lead crawler, nervous silence filled the command cabin while scanners continuously searched beneath the dunes. Dr. Lena Vey sat across from Elias, studying the seismic monitors with restless concentration. Lena was a cybernetic archaeologist in her early 40s, tall and thin, with silver blonde hair tied tightly behind her head and pale skin permanently marked by years beneath artificial laboratory light. Unlike most Heliox employees, she carried herself with quiet empathy rather than arrogance. Her calm voice rarely changed, even under pressure, though exhaustion constantly lingered beneath her sharp gray eyes. Years earlier, her husband disappeared during an excavation beneath the frozen ruins of Europa Station. Since then, Lena buried herself in ancient civilizations, almost as if understanding dead worlds felt easier than surviving the living one. "You still think this place is hiding something?" Elias asked quietly while staring at the storm outside. Lena hesitated. "I think civilizations don't vanish without leaving scars behind." Before Elias could answer, the scanner suddenly emitted a sharp warning tone. Beep, beep, beep. Everyone in the cabin froze. A younger technician named Carter leaned forward nervously. Carter looked barely 25, broad-shouldered with curly blonde hair and anxious green eyes hidden behind cracked scanning goggles. He constantly joked whenever situations became uncomfortable, mostly because silence terrified him. "Please tell me that's just another broken sensor," he muttered uneasily. Lena's expression slowly darkened. "No." Lines of seismic data moved rhythmically across the monitor. Thump, thump, thump. The entire cabin fell silent except for the mechanical pulse echoing through the speakers. Elias stepped closer to the screen. "What am I looking at?" Lena swallowed carefully. "Something beneath us." "Buried machinery?" Carter asked hopefully. "No," Lena's voice lowered slightly. "Machinery doesn't pulse like that." Another thump vibrated softly through the crawler floor itself. Too steady. Too alive. Nobody spoke for several long seconds. Outside, darkness spread across the desert while violent winds slammed against the crawler hull. Finally, Carter forced an awkward laugh. Could be tectonic activity. But even he didn't sound convinced. That night, Elias couldn't sleep. He stood alone, near the observation glass, watching endless dunes disappear beneath silver moonlight. The silent expanse looked almost peaceful from a distance, but something about the desert felt wrong tonight. Heavy. Waiting. Then the pulse returned. Thump. The glass vibrated slightly beneath his hand. Elias stared into the darkness beyond the crawler lights. And for one horrifying moment, he thought he saw the outline of something enormous moving beneath the sand far below the surface. Not drifting. Breathing. Then the dunes became still again. But deep inside his chest, fear had already begun spreading like ice. Somewhere beneath the silent expanse, something ancient had awakened. The desert looked wounded beneath the morning sun. Massive excavation machines crawled across the dunes while storms of red sand spiraled through the air around the growing crater in the center of the silent expanse. Nobody joked anymore. After the pulse detected during the night, fear had quietly settled over the crew like invisible dust. Even the workers spoke less, constantly glancing toward the desert floor as though expecting something to rise from beneath it at any moment. Elias barely slept. Dark circles had deepened beneath his eyes, and the old scar across his jaw looked harsher beneath the pale desert light. He kept replaying the image he thought he saw moving beneath the sand the previous night. Part of him wanted to dismiss it as exhaustion. Another part knew instinct had saved his life too many times to ignore now. The excavation began shortly after dawn. Giant magnetic cranes tore into the ancient dunes while industrial drills screamed against layers of hardened sand compressed over thousands of years. Entire walls of red earth collapsed into the crater as workers cleared section after section without finding anything except stone and buried debris from forgotten ages. By midday, frustration had started spreading across the site. Then the desert suddenly gave way. A thunderous crack echoed across the excavation zone as the ground beneath one of the crawler drills collapsed inward. Workers shouted and stumbled backward while an enormous section of sand sank into darkness below. Dust exploded upward like smoke from a buried volcano. Sirens immediately activated across the camp. Elias reacted first. Ignoring the warning alarms, he grabbed a descent cable and climbed down into the newly opened pit, while sand continued sliding around him in dangerous waves. Lena shouted after him from above, but Elias barely listened. Something deep in his gut told him this moment mattered. The deeper he descended, the colder the air became. That was impossible. Arcani's heat usually remained trapped beneath the dunes, even underground. Yet this hidden chamber felt unnaturally cold, almost preserved. When Elias finally reached the bottom, his boots landed against something solid. Metallic. He aimed his flashlight downward and froze. Black metal stretched beneath layers of dust and compacted stone, smooth in some places, but shattered in others. The surface was covered in strange symbols worn nearly invisible by time. They did not resemble human language. They looked older, sharper. Above him, workers lowered floodlights into the crater. As the light spread across the buried structure, an enormous shape slowly emerged from the darkness. A hand. Massive fingers lay curled beneath the sand, each one larger than an armored transport vehicle. Rust consumed entire sections of the metal, and deep fractures spread across the joints like ancient battle wounds. Yet despite the decay, the shape still carried unnatural detail. Elias could see layered mechanical tendons beneath cracked armor plating. The machine looked disturbingly human. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Even the desert wind above seemed quieter. Then Carter's trembling voice echoed from the rim. Holy God! More workers descended carefully into the crater while scanners and floodlights surrounded the buried structure. Among the new arrivals was Marcus Vale, Heliox's field commander. Marcus was a broad, heavily built man in his late 40s with shaved gray hair, thick brows, and a permanent military stiffness in his posture. His face looked carved from stone, rough and weathered from years spent serving as a combat officer during the energy wars before Heliox recruited him. Unlike Elias, Marcus believed emotions only slowed people down. Years of war had burned empathy out of him until duty became the only thing he trusted. Marcus studied the giant hand silently before speaking into his comm device. Confirming artificial structure beneath excavation site. Begin full extraction immediately. The next 3 days blurred together beneath endless sandstorms and mechanical noise. The crater widened hour by hour as more of the buried machine emerged from the desert. Sections of colossal shoulders appeared beneath the dunes. Then part of the chest. Entire crawler vehicles looked tiny beside the growing titan. The deeper they dug, the stranger the atmosphere became. Electronic equipment glitched constantly near the machine. Compass systems spun without explanation. Several workers claimed they heard distant metallic sounds beneath the sand at night, almost like breathing. Elias spent most of his time near the excavation pit. He could not explain why, but the machine disturbed him in ways he didn't understand. Not because it looked dangerous. Quite the opposite. The giant did not resemble a weapon. It looked tired. On the 4th evening, the final sand layer covering the upper section collapsed away. Floodlights illuminated the buried face for the first time in thousands of years. A gigantic humanoid head rested beneath the desert, half covered in red dust and fractured steel. Its optic sockets remained dark and lifeless, surrounded by cracked black armor scarred by unimaginable age. Long scars crossed the machine's faceplate as though it had endured catastrophic damage before falling beneath the sands. Yet what unsettled Elias most was the expression frozen into the structure itself. The Titan did not look violent. It looked lonely. As night swallowed the excavation site, Elias remained standing at the edge of the crater staring down at the ancient machine while cold winds swept across the dunes. And somewhere deep below the sand, he thought he heard another faint mechanical pulse. Thump! The storm above Arcanes sounded like the end of the world. Sand slammed against the excavation towers while warning sirens echoed faintly across the crater below. Elias stood frozen inside the giant machine's chest cavity, staring at the rows of shattered cryogenic capsules surrounding him in the darkness. Tiny skeletal remains rested inside many of them, still wrapped in decayed thermal blankets that had somehow survived thousands of years beneath the desert. Some capsules remained sealed forever, while others looked violently broken from the inside, as if desperate hands had once tried to escape. Dust drifted slowly through the chamber beneath the pale blue glow now shining from deeper inside the Titan. His chest tightened painfully. This machine had not been built for conquest. It had carried children. Elias slowly stepped closer to one of the capsules. A faded stuffed animal still rested beside the tiny skeleton within, partially melted by age and heat. He swallowed hard, suddenly remembering Mira as a little girl before the wars, before starvation camps and collapsing cities turned survival into humanity's only religion. She used to sleep holding a cloth rabbit every night because storms frightened her. For a brief second, the memories hit him so hard he almost forgot where he was. Then the giant blue optic above him brightened. The chamber trembled violently. Massive gears groaned somewhere deep beneath the buried structure, while waves of sand cascaded down through cracks in the ceiling like waterfalls. Elias instinctively grabbed the nearest support rail as the entire Titan shuddered awake around him. Human life forms, status? The voice echoed through the chamber again. Ancient, deep, exhausted beyond imagination. It sounded less like artificial intelligence and more like a soul trapped alone for thousands of years. Elias forced himself to answer despite his shaking voice. You're still operational? Several seconds passed before the machine responded. Guardian Unit A-01, partial systems restored. The blue optic dimmed slightly. Casualty count unresolved. Pain. Elias could hear it inside the machine's voice. Before he could speak again, harsh footsteps echoed through the chamber entrance behind him. Floodlights suddenly cut through the darkness as armed Heliox security forces climbed inside the Titan. Marcus Vale entered first with 2 soldiers following closely behind him. His scarred face looked colder than usual beneath the flashing emergency lights. "You disobeyed direct orders," Marcus growled toward Elias before his eyes shifted upward toward the glowing optic. For the first time since Elias met him, genuine unease crossed the commander's face. "What the hell is this thing?" "A rescue vessel," Elias answered quietly. There were children inside. Marcus glanced briefly toward the broken capsules without visible emotion. War had damaged him long ago in ways deeper than scars. During the energy wars, Marcus once commanded evacuation units ordered to abandon civilians when resources ran low. Rumors claimed he watched thousands die behind sealed city gates. Since then, he trusted efficiency more than morality. Caring too much had become dangerous to him. Before Marcus could reply, another figure entered the chamber. Director Celine Voss. Unlike the dust-covered workers outside, Celine looked almost untouched by the desert itself. She was a tall woman in her early 50s with sharp black hair cut perfectly at shoulder length and pale bronze skin illuminated by the blue optic overhead. Her dark silver uniform coat remained immaculate despite the storm outside. Thin cybernetic lines glowed faintly beneath the skin near her neck, expensive neural implants reserved only for elite corporate executives. Celine's face carried calm elegance, but her cold gray eyes never stopped calculating. Years earlier, Heliox nearly collapsed during the famine riots after the wars. Celine rebuilt the corporation through ruthless efficiency, sacrificing entire settlements if profits required it. To her supporters, she was brilliant. To everyone else, she was terrifying. Her gaze slowly lifted toward the giant optic. "Incredible," she whispered softly. Then she smiled. Not with wonder, with greed. "How much power is still active inside this machine?" she asked. A01 answered before anyone else could speak. "Primary energy core, critically unstable." Every light inside the chamber flickered violently. Lena's voice suddenly crackled through Elias's comm device from above. "Elias, get out of there now. Energy readings are spiking across the entire structure." The Titan trembled harder this time. Deep metallic groans echoed beneath the desert floor, while distant explosions erupted somewhere outside the crater as overloaded excavation equipment began failing across the site. Then A01 spoke again. Its voice quieter now. "Hostile threat assessment detected." The glowing optic slowly turned toward Celine and the armed soldiers standing behind her. For the first time since awakening, the Guardians sounded afraid. Before dawn, the desert became a battlefield. Black Heliox warships descended through the storm clouds like predators circling wounded prey. Their engines roared across the silent expanse while spotlights swept over the excavation crater below. Hundreds of armed soldiers surrounded the site within minutes, their dark combat armor reflecting flashes of red lightning from the growing storm overhead. Massive transport cannons unfolded beside the dunes while missile platforms locked directly onto the buried Titan beneath the sand. Elias stood near the edge of the crater feeling cold anger spread through his chest. Celine Voss had not wasted time. To her, A01 was not a living intelligence carrying the remains of lost children. It was power, a resource valuable enough to justify slaughter. Marcus Vale approached Elias while soldiers rushed past them toward the excavation lifts. The commander's heavy boots sank slightly into the loose sand with every step. His weathered face looked exhausted beneath the flashing emergency lights, though his voice remained hard. "You need to leave the site." Elias turned sharply toward him. "They're going to kill it." Marcus hesitated for half a second before answering. "Our orders are to secure the core. That thing protected children." Elias shouted. "Did you even see what was inside it?" The old soldier's jaw tightened. For a brief moment, guilt flickered behind his tired eyes. Then it vanished again beneath discipline. This world doesn't survive on sentiment. Behind them, transport elevators descended into the crater carrying heavily armed retrieval teams toward the giant machine's chest cavity. The soldiers moved carefully, but fear lingered beneath their training. Everyone had heard the machine speak now. Everyone knew the titan beneath the desert was alive. Inside the excavation pit, floodlights illuminated A-01's partially exposed body, while endless sandstorms spiraled around its massive frame. Rusted black armor stretched across the crater like the remains of a fallen god buried beneath centuries of silence. The glowing blue optic remained fixed toward the sky without movement. Then the giant slowly moved. A deep metallic groan echoed through the desert as ancient systems awakened beneath the sand. Entire dunes collapsed inward while enormous mechanical joints strained for the first time in thousands of years. Soldiers stumbled backward in panic as the titan's colossal hand clenched slowly against the earth. The ground shook violently. "Open fire!" someone screamed. Missiles launched immediately. Explosions erupted across A-01's chest and shoulders as waves of fire swallowed the ancient machine. Shockwaves tore through the crater while burning debris scattered across the sand. Elias was thrown hard against the excavation railing, pain exploding through his shoulder. But through the smoke and flames, the giant still moved. Slowly, painfully. A-01 pushed itself upward from the desert floor, while massive sections of rusted armor cracked apart beneath centuries of pressure. Entire walls of compacted sand collapsed from its body as the titan rose higher above the crater. It was enormous beyond comprehension. Even Helioc's warships suddenly looked small beside it. More missiles struck its torso. One explosion tore directly through the giant's left shoulder, exposing glowing internal machinery beneath shattered armor plating. Sparks rained across the desert. Yet A-01 still did not attack. Instead, the titan turned toward Elias. For one impossible moment, the giant machine seemed less concerned with its own destruction than the fragile human standing below. A colossal metal arm moved across the battlefield. Then the next missile barrage hit. A-01 shielded Elias with its own body. The explosion slammed against the Guardian's arm while Elias collapsed beneath the massive shadow protecting him from the firestorm above. Heat roared across the sand around him, but the giant refused to move away. Elias stared upward in disbelief at the shattered machine towering over him. This thing had every reason to hate humanity. It had been abandoned beneath the desert for thousands of years. Forgotten, buried beside the children it failed to save. Now humans had awakened it only to tear it apart again for profit. And still, it chose to protect life. A sudden transmission echoed across every battlefield speaker. Celine's calm voice cut through the chaos. Orbital cannon authorization approved. Even Marcus looked shocked. "She's using orbital weapons here?" Lena grabbed Elias by the arm desperately. Her pale face looked horrified beneath the storm lights. "If they fire from orbit, this entire excavation zone will disappear." Far above the clouds, a massive glow slowly appeared in the sky. The orbital platform was charging. Below it, A-01 looked upward silently, while blue light flickered weakly inside its damaged optic. Then the ancient guardian spoke one final sentence. "Evacuation protocol initiated." And for the first time since the machine awakened, Elias realized A-01 already knew it was going to die. The desert burned beneath a sky split open by fire. Massive orbital beams tore through the crimson clouds above Arcanes while shock waves rolled across the dunes like tidal waves. Entire sections of the excavation zone vanished beneath explosions bright enough to turn night into white daylight. Helioc's warships scattered through the storm, desperately avoiding debris raining down from the heavens. And in the middle of the destruction, A-01 kept moving. The ancient titan carried survivors across the collapsing desert, while pieces of its own body fell apart with every step. Entire armor plates ripped away from the Guardian's frame as overloaded systems failed deep inside its ancient core. One of its massive legs dragged heavily through the sand after being nearly severed by missile impacts. Sparks bled from exposed machinery beneath cracked black metal. But the giant never stopped protecting the humans beneath its shadow. Inside the damaged chest chamber, Elias struggled to keep his balance while emergency lights flickered weakly around him. The cryogenic capsules surrounding the room had gone dark now, disappearing into silence once again. Every few seconds the entire chamber shook violently from another distant orbital strike. Lena knelt beside a failing control console nearby, desperately studying streams of ancient symbols racing across the cracked display screens. Sweat mixed with sand across her pale face, while exhaustion hollowed her sharp gray eyes even further. "Its systems are collapsing too fast," she whispered. "The core is destabilizing." Elias looked upward toward the giant chamber walls trembling around them. "Can we stop it?" Lena hesitated too long before answering. "No." That single word hit harder than the explosions outside. For several moments, Elias simply stood there listening to the mechanical groans echoing through the dying Guardian. Strange emotions twisted inside his chest. He had known this machine for less than 2 days, yet somehow its loneliness felt painfully familiar to him. A-01 had spent thousands of years buried beside the children it failed to save. Forgotten. Alone. Carrying guilt no machine should have been capable of feeling. And despite everything humanity had done to it, it still chose mercy. The chamber suddenly lurched violently sideways. Workers screamed as the Titan stumbled against a dune outside. Emergency sirens erupted through the interior, while warning symbols flashed crimson across every remaining screen. "Structural integrity below 20%, Lena read quietly. Her voice almost sounded like mourning. Then A-01 spoke again. Its ancient voice sounded weaker now, distorted by failing systems. "Safe evacuation zone, located." The giant finally stopped moving. Elias climbed toward an opening in the damaged chest armor and stared outside. The sight stole his breath. A-01 stood atop the highest dune in the silent expanse while endless storms raged around it. Far below, surviving workers and damaged crawler vehicles sheltered behind the Titan's colossal frame as orbital fire continued destroying the desert behind them. The machine had carried them farther than any human evacuation convoy could have survived. And now, it could go no farther. A deep blue glow pulsed faintly beneath the cracked armor around A-01's chest. The core was dying. Far above the clouds, the final orbital cannon strike began charging. The sky itself glowed white from the energy gathering in space. Even Helios warships started retreating from the blast radius. Elias felt tears burning unexpectedly behind his eyes. He stepped closer to the giant optic staring toward the distant horizon where dawn slowly pushed through the storm clouds. "You saved us," he whispered. The ancient Guardian remained silent for several seconds. Then its fading blue optic shifted slightly toward him. "Humanity survival probability." Static crackled through the voice. "Preserved." For the first time since awakening beneath the desert, A-01 almost sounded peaceful. Not afraid. Not alone anymore. The first rays of sunlight broke across the dunes, illuminating the Titan's battered frame in soft gold beneath the dying storm. Elias suddenly understood something heartbreaking in that moment. A-01 had not stayed alive all these centuries waiting for revenge. It had simply waited long enough to finish protecting someone. Then the final orbital strike descended from the heavens. White light swallowed the world. Days later, rescue teams cautiously returned to the silent expanse. The battlefield was gone. Entire dunes had melted into black glass beneath the unimaginable heat of the blast. Silence covered the desert once more beneath a calm morning sky. Elias walked alone through the ruins until he reached the center of the crater and stopped. One massive metallic hand still emerged from the sand. Weathered, broken, half-buried once more beneath drifting dunes. But deep within the center of its giant palm, a tiny blue light still pulsed softly beneath the dust. Thump, thump, thump. Elias stared at the weak glow for a long time while desert wind swept quietly across the empty horizon. Somewhere deep beneath Arcanes, the last Guardian was still alive. Sometimes, God sends miracles in unexpected ways, not through power or destruction, but through sacrifice, mercy, and the courage to protect others even in a broken world. A-01 was only a forgotten machine beneath the desert. Yet even after thousands of years alone, it still chose compassion over hatred. Maybe that is the lesson for all of us. In everyday life, people around us are fighting silent battles we cannot see. A small act of kindness, a moment of understanding, or simply refusing to give up on others can become someone's miracle. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who may need hope today. Leave a comment below and tell us where you are watching from. And if you believe kindness still matters, Please subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. May God bless you, your family, and every gentle soul watching tonight.